Rest, dear. He's not yours anymore." The words were soft, almost comforting, but there was nothing comforting about the way Evelyn, my mother-in-law, stood at the foot of my hospital bed, her manicured hands folded neatly in front of her. I tried to sit up, my body weak from labor, but the moment I moved, pain shot through me. Where was my baby? I had only held him for a few minutes before a nurse had taken him away, saying they needed to run some routine checks. That had been hours ago. And now Evelyn was here, speaking as if she were in charge. I swallowed the panic rising in my throat. "Where is he?" Evelyn gave me a tight-lipped smile. "The doctors are making sure he's in perfect health. You don't need to worry about anything." But I did worry, because the look in her eyes told me everything. This wasn't just about my son's health. This was about control. I tried to push myself up further, ignoring the ache in my limbs. "I want to see him." Evelyn's smile didn't waver, but there was steel beneath it. "You just gave birth, dear. You need to recover." She reached over, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face like a mother would to a child. "You should be grateful you have us to help." Grateful. That word sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't stupid. I had seen the change in them the moment I announced my pregnancy. They had spent months pretending to accept me, playing the part of a supportive family, all because I was carrying their precious grandson. But now that he was here, they didn't need to pretend anymore. I clenched the hospital sheets in my fists. I said, "I want to see my son." Evelyn's lips pursed. "You will. Once everything is in place." My heart pounded. What does that mean? Before she could answer, the door opened and Nicholas, my husband, walked in. I looked at him desperately, expecting him to step in, to tell his mother to stop. But instead, he stood next to her, his face blank. "Nicholas," I choked out. "Tell them I want to see our baby." His throat bobbed. For a split second, guilt flashed across his face. But then he exhaled, his shoulders straightened, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "We already spoke to the doctors. He's fine, but we think it's best if he stays with my parents for now." The world tilted. "What?" My voice barely came out. Nicholas stepped forward, reaching for my hand, but I yanked it away. "Listen to me," he said softly. "You've been through a lot. My parents just want to make sure you have time to recover without stress. This is what's best for everyone." Everyone. Everyone except me. I turned to Evelyn, my voice trembling with rage. "You planned this." She didn't even deny it. "A child needs stability," she said smoothly. "And let's be honest, dear. What kind of stability can you provide? You didn't finish school. You don't have a real career. How will you manage on your own?" I couldn't breathe. They had never intended to let me be his mother. I had been nothing more than a vessel for their legacy. And now that they had what they wanted, they were cutting me out completely. But they underestimated me, because if they thought I was just going to sit back and let them take my son away from me, they were about to find out exactly who they were dealing with. I wasn't supposed to end up here. If life had gone the way I planned, I would have been finishing my degree, not lying in a hospital bed, while my in-laws decided whether or not I was worthy of raising my own child. I had always been a fighter. I grew up in a world where nothing was handed to me, where every success came from relentless effort. I was the oldest of 4 siblings, raised by a single mother who worked herself to the bone just to put food on the table. We lived paycheck to paycheck, and I learned early on that dreams were a luxury we couldn't afford. But I was determined. I studied harder than anyone else, took on extra shifts to help my family, and managed to get into a good university on a scholarship. I had plans, big ones, a career, a future, a life where I wasn't constantly struggling just to survive. Then Nicholas happened. At first, he felt like a miracle. He was kind, charming, and made me feel seen in a way I never had before. He didn't look down on me for my background. At least that's what I believed. To him, I wasn't just the girl from the poor neighborhood. I was someone he admired, respected, loved. When he proposed, I hesitated. Not because I didn't love him. I did. But because deep down, I knew his world was different from mine. His family came from wealth that spanned generations. They were the kind of people who had never worried about rent or medical bills, who grew up believing the world belonged to them. I told myself that love could bridge the gap. I was wrong. The moment I said I do, everything changed. Nicholas's family had never hidden their disapproval of me, but before the wedding they at least made an effort to be civil. Afterward, they barely even tried. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, treated me like an unwanted house guest in my own home. She constantly reminded me how lucky I was to have married her son, as if Nicholas had done me some great charity by loving me. She controlled everything, the way the house was run, the social circles we were expected to mingle in, even the clothes I wore. She had a way of making me feel small, insignificant. Victoria, my sister-in-law, followed suit. She would make snide comments, subtle enough that Nicholas never saw the full extent of it. "Oh, you're still working. That's cute. Most women in our family prioritize home life. I heard your little sister got into some trouble at school. Not surprising, considering her environment." They never saw me as one of them. I tried. God, I tried to be the wife they wanted me to be. I played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law, nodding along, swallowing my pride, telling myself that as long as Nicholas and I were happy, that was enough. But I wasn't happy. And worse? Nicholas never noticed. He didn't see how his mother picked apart everything I did. He didn't hear the whispers when I walked into her room. He never questioned why I had to fight for basic respect from his family. I should have walked away, but then I got pregnant. And suddenly I mattered. The moment Evelyn found out I was carrying a boy, she changed overnight. Suddenly she was warm, attentive, acting as if she had adored me all along. She started including me in conversations, inviting me to high society events, telling her friends how thrilled she was about the baby. I wanted to believe it was real. But it wasn't me she cared about. It was him. I should have seen it coming. The moment I gave birth, they took him from me. The nurse had barely placed him in my arms before they found a reason to separate us. They called it routine care, but I knew better. Hours passed, and no one would tell me where he was. Then Evelyn came in, smiling like a queen addressing a servant. "You need to rest. We'll handle everything from here." And that was it. That was the moment I broke. Because I'd spent years swallowing my pride, shrinking myself down, enduring their cruelty in silence. But taking my son away from me? That was a line they should have never crossed. I lay in that hospital bed for 3 days, feeling like a prisoner in my own nightmare. 3 days of hearing nurses whisper about how my son was being taken care of by my loving in-laws. 3 days of Evelyn visiting with her carefully rehearsed sympathy, telling me to focus on recovery while she controlled every decision regarding my child. I screamed. I begged. Silence. Every request was met with the same condescending tone. "You need to rest, dear. You're still weak. Everything is being handled." Handled. Like I was some inconvenient problem they had to deal with. I felt helpless, furious, trapped. But here's the thing. You don't grow up fighting for your life without learning one crucial lesson. The best revenge isn't loud. It's patient. And if they thought I was just going to accept this, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The moment I was discharged, I knew I had to be smart. I couldn't storm into that house and demand my son back. Evelyn was powerful, well-connected. She had lawyers, money, and the unwavering loyalty of people who had been conditioned to believe in her authority. So I did the only thing I could do. I waited. I played the role of the weak, defeated woman they wanted me to be. I let them believe I had given up. And while they celebrated their victory, I started building my case. It started with the recordings. Every conversation I had with Evelyn, Nicholas, or anyone in that house, I made sure to record it. Every snide remark, every dismissive comment, every admission that they were keeping my son from me. I documented everything. The way Evelyn controlled every aspect of my child's life. The way Nicholas refused to stand up for me. The way I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And then I started digging deeper. But the real breakthrough? Evelyn had a secret. And secrets. They were more fragile than she thought, than just emotional manipulation. I needed something that could destroy them. And then I found it. Not a whisper, not a rumor, a cold, hard proof, the kind that could destroy the Whitmore name forever. Who had been working for the family for years. Be careful what you say around Mr. Robert. He doesn't like people asking too many questions. Mr. Robert, Evelyn's husband, the man who rarely spoke but always watched, the man who controlled the real family business. I'd never questioned what exactly made the Whitmore family so wealthy. Nicholas had always brushed it off as investments and real estate, but when I started asking around, the answers weren't so simple, because beneath the surface there were whispers of corruption, fraud, money laundering, business dealings that weren't exactly legal. It wasn't just a suspicion. I found proof. Old financial records, inconsistencies in their company's tax filings, shell companies registered under fake names. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at, but the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The Whitmores weren't just rich. They were criminals. And I had just found the one thing Evelyn truly feared. The night I confronted Nicholas, he barely looked up from his phone. I placed the stack of documents in front of him, my voice cold. "Explain this." He frowned, glancing at the papers lazily. "What is this supposed to be?" "Your family's dirty little secret." His face drained a color. I leaned in. "You and your mother have spent weeks trying to push me out of my own son's life. You think I don't know what you've been planning? You think I don't know about the lawyers, the paperwork, the way you're slowly cutting me out of every decision?" Nicholas swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about." I scoffed. "Of course you do. But here's the thing, Nicholas." I tapped the papers in front of me. "Your mother may be the queen of this little empire, but she has one weakness, and I just found it." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting toward the door like he wanted to escape. I wasn't going to let him. "You have two choices," I continued. "One, you give me back my son. You fix this mess you and your mother created, and you do it now." "And if I don't?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, slow and sharp. "Then I take all of this to the authorities." Nicholas sucked in a breath. "You wouldn't." I tilted my head. "Try me." The next morning, Evelyn didn't send a message. She didn't call. She summoned me, like a queen expecting her subject. She was waiting for me behind her grand mahogany desk, hands folded neatly in front of her. Nicholas stood beside her, his jaw tight, his face pale. She didn't greet me, didn't offer me a seat. Instead, she simply asked, "What do you want?" I took my time answering. I wanted her to feel it, to know that for the first time she wasn't the one in control. "I want my son," I said finally, "and I want out." Her lips thinned. "And if I say no?" I slid a USB drive across the desk. "Then I ruin you." She didn't even reach for it. She just stared at me, her cold mask slipping for the first time since I'd met her. For the first time she was afraid. And she should be. Because this time, I was the one calling the shots. Evelyn was always calculated. Every move she made was carefully orchestrated. Every word, every decision, every manipulation designed to keep her in control. But the moment she saw the USB drive sitting on her desk, she knew. She had lost. Oh, I watched as she reached for it, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling ever so slightly. She plugged it into her laptop, her sharp eyes scanning the files, her face void of expression. But the silence in the room was suffocating. Nicholas stood beside her, his jaw tight, his face pale as a ghost. It was almost pathetic, watching the man who once swore to protect me wilt under the weight of his mother's crumbling empire. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as I let them absorb the reality of their situation. "I want full custody," I said, my voice unwavering. Evelyn closed the laptop, exhaling through her nose. "That's not going to happen." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, but it is." Nicholas finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "This is blackmail." I tilted my head. "No, Nicholas. This is consequences." Evelyn stiffened. For the first time I saw it. Fear. A flicker, barely there, but enough. "You wouldn't dare." "If this scandal gets out, it affects you too. You're the mother of our heir. Do you really want to be dragged into this mess?" I chuckled. "Dragged into it? Evelyn, I've been drowning in it since the moment I married your son. The difference is, now I have a way out." Evelyn stiffened. Nicholas rubbed a hand down his face, his voice dropping to that same condescending tone he had always used whenever he thought I was being irrational. "Can we at least talk about this rationally? I know you're upset, but we can work something out." I turned to him, eyes burning with resentment. "You had every opportunity to work something out, Nicholas, but you chose them. You stood by while your mother tried to erase me from my son's life." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You let them treat me like nothing more than a disposable incubator." He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "I didn't want to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't want to hurt me?" "Nicholas, you watched me beg for my own child and did nothing. You sided with them, thinking I would just accept it." His silence was answer enough. I exhaled sharply. I'm done being patient. You have two choices. Either you sign over full custody to me, and I walk away quietly, or I take this to court, and your entire family burns with you." Evelyn's nostrils flared, but she didn't speak. She knew the power balance had shifted. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the one holding all the cards. I stood up, smoothing out my jacket. "You have 24 hours. After that, I go public." And with that, I walked out for the last time. The next day, I received an envelope delivered to my apartment. Inside was everything I demanded. The custody agreement was signed. The restraining order against the Whitmore family was in place. And just like that, I was free. I held the papers in my hands, my chest rising and falling with deep, measured breaths. It was over. I had won. And yet, there was nothing satisfying about knowing that the father of my child had been willing to throw me away so easily. Nicholas hadn't even tried to fight for our marriage. He hadn't come after me, hadn't tried to stop me, because in the end, I had never been his priority. And that was the final lesson I needed to learn. I looked at my son, sleeping peacefully in his crib, his tiny hands curled into fists. I bent down, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I've got you," I whispered. "No one is ever taking you away from me again." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. People like Evelyn don't lose often. She was the kind of woman who moved through a life untouched, bending others to her will, with a carefully placed word, a well-timed threat, a quiet display of power. She had never met a challenge she couldn't crush. Until me. Until I showed her that no matter how powerful she thought she was not invincible. But here's the thing. Winning that fight wasn't about beating Evelyn or proving her wrong. It was about reclaiming myself. For too long, I had let other people define my worth. I let Nicholas convince me that love meant sacrifice. Always mine, never his. I let his family strip away my confidence, my choices, my voice. I had shrunk myself to fit into a mold they had designed for me. But in the end, they didn't break me. Because the moment they tried to take my son from me, I found a strength I didn't even know I had. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Love is not control. Nicholas told himself he was doing the right thing by listening to his family, that he was being rational and responsible. But real love, real partnership, it doesn't ask you to choose between the people you love. It doesn't demand submission in the name of tradition or power or convenience. Real love stands beside you. It fights for you. And if someone is willing to let you suffer for their own comfort, they don't love you. Not really. Nicholas never did. At least not in the way that mattered. And honestly, that was his loss. People ask me if I regret marrying him. If I could go back, would I do it all differently? The truth is, no. Because if I had never married Nicholas, I never would have had my son. And more than that, I never would have learned what I'm capable of. Sometimes we have to lose something. A relationship, an illusion, a version of ourselves we thought we needed to be, to finally see the truth. And the truth is, I was never meant to be a Whitmore. I was meant to be me. A woman who fought for her child. A woman who stood up to an entire empire and won. A woman who walked away from a toxic love, not because she had to, but because she finally knew her worth. And now, I don't look back, not with regret, not with bitterness, just with clarity, because for the first time in my life, I am finally free. And that is worth everything.